Renaissance. It was a period of economical, artistic, and political rebirth that lasted from the mid-1300s to the 1700s. So a lot of philosophers and thinkers from this time, they were really eager to explore like human experiments during this time period. And like the ideal was like sort of just to be a jack of all trades. They had to be gifted in like various different talents and skills like art, architecture, and science. The Renaissance began in Italy, in Florence, but like throughout time it spread all across Europe, and even into America a little bit too. For this show, I have with me two very special guests that lived during the Renaissance themselves. So I'll be interviewing them both about the history and daily life of this period. So Lorenza, Elena, why don't you two introduce yourselves?
My name is Elena Visconti, and I am a professional actress for the renowned theater Commedia dell'arte. I played the art of Columbine in an Italian comedy alongside other famous actors like Isabella and Francesco Adreni.
I'm Lorenzo De Crivelli, and I am a renowned painter and sculptor who's worked with numerous projects with other famous artists such as Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Raphael.
Well, it's a pleasure having you two on the show. So why don't we start with what, sparked the Renaissance? How did it come about?
Let's see. Following the Middle Ages, many things contributed to the beginning of this period, such as the emergence of humanism, the discovery of ancient Greek and Roman texts, as well as artistic and technological revivals.
Okay, good to know. I noticed you mentioned humanism. What is it, and how did it influence the people living in this era?
Humanism was a cultural movement that arose in Italy during the 14th century. It promoted the idea that everyone was the center of their own universe, and that they should embrace human activities made in classical arts, education, literature, and science. However, it also allowed Europeans to question the authority of the Roman Catholic Church. As more people learned to read and write, they started to study and analyze religion.
Well, what about Florence? What did Florence have to do with the Renaissance at all?
Well, Florence, especially at the time, was a city-state, rich in cultural history. Citizens there were especially prosperous and could afford to support artists whose names would later be remembered throughout history. I should also mention that the Medicis, a very rich and powerful family that ruled Florence over 60 years, greatly encouraged the careers of rising stars like Michelangelo and Da Vinci.
Well, how did it manage to spread across all of Europe, if it was just in like one city-state?
From Florence, the Renaissance spread to other surrounding city-states, like Venice, Milan, Ferrara, and more. During the 15th century, ideas traveled from Italy to France, throughout the Western and Northern Europe. Even though other European countries experienced the Renaissance way later than Italy, it still had a huge impact on the entire continent.
Well, what was that impact? Like, what impact did it have on art and like all those other fields of study?
The Renaissance was quite unique in the way that all of fields of study would be blended together. For example, artists would incorporate anatomy into their work so that they could perfectly recreate the human body with extreme fluidity and precision. Techniques like perspective, shadows, light, and emotions added depth to portraits. Their art reflected realism and naturalism, aiming to depict both people and objects in the way that were true to life. Some famous artist pieces you may know are the Mona Lisa, the Last Supper, and the Statue of David.
Architects studied mathematics for engineering and designing purposes. Like immense buildings with ample domes, scientific discoveries led to a new perspective on astrology and mathematics. Dramatic performances were acted out in theaters, bringing entertainment and light to everyone who watched.
All right. Well, what can you tell us about the jobs and lives of Renaissance men and women?
Well, for us, jobs in daily life varied greatly based on their social status. Working class women tended the fields alongside their husband and managed the household. The wives of middle class merchants would help their husbands run the business, and the upper class woman's lives revolved solely around her home, taking on activities such as sewing, cooking, and entertaining. However, the Renaissance brought along an extensive amount of changes to our role in society. Over time, we were able to distinguish ourselves as artists, writers, scholars, doctors, and performers. Some women even influenced politics, the economy, and culture. Others taught religion and lived in convents as nuns.
Men were in charge of all aspects of society, able to work, vote, own their property. We function as fathers, husbands, teachers, preachers, magistrates, and lords. Beyond that, we are expected to excel in learning many different fields of study, becoming inventors, philosophers, architects, writers, mathematics, artists, and much more. We made discoveries in science, improved forms of art like writing, painting, sculpting. Depending on social class, we did most, if not all, the labor on the farm. We're in charge of providing goods to sell and oftentimes fought in wars. There's also the responsibility of caring and providing for our wives and children.
All right, last question. How did the Renaissance come to an end? Like, was it immediate or did it happen slowly over time?
I'd say it was definitely over time, as there were several things that would have contributed to its decline. As the 15th century came to close, invaders from Spain, France, Germany pledged the Italian peninsula. Trade routes changed leaders to periods of economy decline and limiting the amount of money citizens could contribute to the arts. Down the line, the Catholic Church censored artists, writers, and humanists. Renaissance thinkers couldn't show their creativity out of fear, as the church made this an act punished by death. By the time the 17th century rolled around, the movement had finally died out.
All right, that's all for today. Thank you for joining us on the show, Elena and Lorenzo, and thank you guys all for listening.